Hello again. We had a lot going on this week, from motorcycle carburetors to tractor carburetors. We got the saddlebags done on the 94 Harley, and even got some more work done on this tractor block, and you'll see that, as well as a couple other things thrown in as well. Thanks for tuning in. I'm about to wet sand these side covers again so we can pick back up where we left off. The lifted spots are wet sanded down. I took Scotch-Brite and went over both bags completely so that the next coat of blue will stick. Let's give it a try. The blue's back on them again. It looks real good. So I'm going to let these kick off for about an hour or two. Then I'll start laying out for the white stripes. I'm starting to mask off for the white stripes. I've got the bottom one here 1 inch apart that's going to go between the bars, and I've got this one coming from the top down to here, and then I'm going to figure out the line, or where I want the line to be that's going to connect the two. And once I figure that out, I'll bring that down and then get the rest of these cut out of the center so it's all one line, and figure out how I'm going to end the line, and then I can mask everything off from there. Here it is all masked out. The only thing I have to do is finish off how I want the end to look. But I'm going to open up the center here now. So I've got my distances correct, I've got the lines, or the tape rather, laid where I want the lines to be. So now what I need to do is where the white's going to be, I need to open up these pieces, get those out of there, so it is all one continuous piece. So I'm going to start here, get rid of this one. Like I said before, you got to be really careful, make sure you're not pushing too hard, just enough to cut the tape. Get it out of the way. This is going to be good here. I've already got that one. So now what I have to do is get this center opened up here. So to do that, I'm going to make a cut right there. I get to use the tape as my line. So it should be nice and clean, the cut anyway. There we go. Push that up a little bit, kind of hit that by mistake. There you go. Alright, and then you can kind of see what's happening here. So I'll do the same thing with this one down here. Definitely make sure you've got a brand new razor blade, so you can make nice clean cuts the first time. Don't want them to be jagged. Get my fingernail under here to pull this up, and there you go. So you kind of can see the line that I've made here. None of this tape here matters because that's all going to be masked over to retain the blue. So all I'll do now is figure out how I want this to end. Do I want it to be a point? Do I just want it to come up that way to keep the line with the bag itself? But I'll figure all that out very shortly. The design is masked off, so now it's got to finish masking off the rest of the saddlebag, and then we can paint on the white. You want to really be careful here with the orange pinstripe tape and the yellow, that you really push down tight and follow the contours with every inch of that tape, so that there's nowhere that any white can sneak under it, or else you're going to have to mist blue back over that, and it'll just be time consuming. So really make sure that tape is down nice and tight before you move to the next step. So again, we'll get this all finished masked off, we'll spray on some white, and I like this design a lot better already. The stripes are masked off good, now it's time to put on the white. But just like last time, I'm only going to put on one good coat before I let it set up, and then pull the tape off, and then we'll be ready for the clear. Here they are unmasked and ready for clear coat. They are upside down, so the effect might be kind of lost, but once they're on the bike, I'm pretty sure they're going to look great. I'm sure now you can see what my vision was in doing the bags this way. We have the white coming off at the top, coming around through here, then it'll zig down to the second line and then come across between the two bars. So I'm above the bar here and between the two bars there. So it's going to look pretty good, I think, once it's all back together. So this just puts us yet another step closer to getting this thing back down on the ground and taking it for a ride. So we'll get the other bags done and everything mounted and put back on. Then we only have one thing left to focus on, and that's the trunk. We have to do the body work and paint on that, and so that's what we're going to get started on for next week. A gentleman that works with one of my past graduates, Mike Pigg, has an old 51 Farmall Cub. It's gotten some starting issues. One of the things I noticed when I was over there the other day is that the carburetor is leaking pretty bad, so I'm sure it's flooding. So I want to get that problem straightened out first, and then we'll start checking out the rest of the tractor. I've got the screws out of the top of the carburetor, and I'm ready to separate it. Looks good inside. Don't see any water or anything. It's not as dirty as I thought it would be, but more importantly here we're going to make sure that the needles doesn't have any dirt in it, and also that it is actually sealing like it's supposed to. So we'll get the rest of this apart, get it cleaned up real good, and see what we have. With the carburetor disassembled, I'm going to take the body pieces and soak them into our carburetor solvent for a little while. Then we'll get busy putting this back together. Again, this is something you've seen me do several times with some motorcycle carburetors. We'll get these soaked for a couple of hours, pull them out, clean them off, and then we can start putting them back together. But that'll probably be next week. I've begun taking the rear master cylinder apart for the drag bike. What I found is a lot of dirt and debris inside the master cylinder itself. So I've cleaned up the reservoir, but I think what's going on here, and the reason that it's dragging, is something actually that the Auto 2s are learning right now, is about compensating ports in the master cylinder. Then if it's plugged, it won't allow the master cylinder to release the pressure. It'll keep fluid pressure on both sides of the piston so that it can't move. So I think that might be what's going on, because it's really dirty in here, and we need to get all this cleaned up really well, pull the master cylinder apart, get all that trash out of there, and then it should work fine. We've got the master cylinder apart and cleaned up. What we found here is that it was a lot of debris in this thing, and I'm hoping that was the issue. Our seals and everything are pretty pliable, so I think we're going to be okay there. The way this functions is, this is the piston here. This is the actual seal, so when you press on the pedal, in this case the motorcycle pedal, it's going to move this forward this way, and there's going to be fluid in here, and since it's not compressible, it's going to move forward within the cylinder, and that's going to create hydraulic pressure in the brake system. And then this seal back here is what keeps it from leaking out of the master cylinder, and there is fluid going to be behind this as well. So I think what was happening is there was fluid built up behind here, which is normal, but it wasn't allowing it to bleed back up into the master cylinder reservoir. So then it had basically a hydrolock. We had fluid pressure on both sides, and the piston couldn't move. So I think now with everything cleaned up, we're going to put some brake fluid on it, get it all back together. I think we're going to find it's going to be okay. All right, just like with the wheel cylinder, we're going to lubricate everything up with brake fluid. So I'm going to get the seal lubed up first, get it put down back into the master cylinder, being real careful so we don't kink the seal. All right, now put a little more fluid in there like that. Then I'm going to take the piston and the secondary seal, get it lubed up, and then get this pushed back through like so. Went in nice and easy. All right, and it's already working like it's supposed to. It's popping back out at me, so I know it is going to release itself. It took quite a bit of banging on the edge of a table to get it to come out of there with all that debris. But now it looks like it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So we'll get the rest of this back together with the push rod, and I think that's going to solve our rear brake lockup problem on that drag bike. Now, and then we can get busy building that front caliper. The master cylinder is all back together and functioning as it should, so it's ready to reinstall it on the bike, so the rear end will be done. Then we just have to focus on that front caliper and get the front brakes working. Jonah's got a set of carburetors off of a 1994 Kawasaki Concourse. It's been sitting for several years, so we want to go through these and make sure that they're in good order before we try to start the bike. They don't look too bad inside so far, but we'll get the jets all cleaned up and before we put them back on the bike, and hopefully get this thing fired off soon.
Here I'm removing the floats as part of the carburetor disassembly for cleaning.
Pulling out the pilot screws, turning them in to check to see what the initial adjustment was. We found that they're all 3.5. and that's pretty excessive, but that could be what the specs call for, so we're going to have to check the book when we put it back together to see what the adjustments should be.
I'm using a caliper to measure the float level from the base of the carburetor to the bottom of the float. I'm using a small screwdriver to make the adjustment for the float level. Then I check again with the caliper until I reach the specification of 17 millimeters.
When this was pulled apart, Jonah had noticed that the pilot screws were in 3.5 turns. After he investigated the specifications, we found that it's supposed to be 2 turns, so he's setting them all at 2 turns now. So he's going in until it seats, then he'll back it out 2 full turns, and that'll be a good setting for the initial adjustment once we get the carburetors back on the bike and get it started. It's been a while since I've worked on the 36 Harley. This is one of the wheels for it. The tires, even though they were brand new, they're dry rotted because they've been on there for so long. And I'm also not only going to be putting new tires on this eventually, but I am going to be painting these wheels. I'm not sure exactly which paint scheme I'm going to put on this bike yet, but I am pretty confident that I'm not going to want the wheels to be black. So I'm going to go ahead and at least get this tire dismounted from the wheel and get the tube out of it, because I actually am going to be using the tube in another bike that I need to get rolling around, so I need to put the tube in that tire. These machines weren't specifically designed to do motorcycle tires, but if you're careful in your setup, you can be successful in dismounting and mounting them. While torquing the mains down for the old tractor block, a bolt broke. This is the second one that's broken so far, so I've decided just to get all new grade 8 bolts and just replace them all. So which means I'm going to have to drill the holes through the heads for the safety wire to go through. So I've got my drill bit set up here. It's an 1/8 inch, and the way I'm setting up the bolts is to put them into the device here, and I'm going to lay it flat this way so that it's perfectly level and flat. And the bolt is sitting there, so I'll be able to clamp it down and put good pressure on it. So once I get that clamped in place, we'll be able to do the drilling. What I want to make sure, I don't know if I've ever pointed this out before, but for any drill chucks that you use a key to lock them, you should always use all 3 holes to lock them. Some people think that they're just there for convenience, that you just use whichever hole is closer. It doesn't work that way. You start gently snugging each one of the 3, and then you go back and do them again. And it's really even more important on drill bits this small in an actual press, because as you're drilling in through it, if you're not paying a whole lot of attention and you're applying too much pressure, the drill bit will actually slide back up into the chuck. So you want to make sure that the jaws are definitely really tight before you begin doing any kind of drilling, whether it's with a press or with a hand drill. I've got the bolts set up in the vise and my new drill bit, so we're going to turn this thing on and start drilling for our safety wire. I'm going to keep pulling back every once in a while, spray a little bit of penetrating oil in there to help lubricate it, keep the bit cool. We'll also cut faster that way. But I got 4 drill bits just in case, but one should do it as long as we're careful. We don't try to cut too fast and burn them up. A lot easier when you got somebody to stand there and spray it for you. Alright, so let's take the clamp loose. We have a hole perfectly drilled through our bolt head. Actually, it looks pretty even. So that'll be where we run our safety wire through to lock all the main cap bolts together. I've got all of the old bolts out of the main caps for the crankshaft, and new bolts installed. I'm really glad I did that. Just want to feel a lot more comfortable about it. Now the torque spec for this thing, based on the bolt size, being a grade 8, should be 155 pound-feet of torque. I've already got them torqued to 100. I'm going to set it at 125. Now the reason I'm going to go down a little bit less than that, it should be less strain on the block, but also I don't need them to be that high, along with the safety wire as well. They're not going to back off. But this tractor is not going to be put into the field and go back to work, so it's not going to be under heavy load anymore. It's going to spend the majority of its life just idling around, or maybe using the power take-off belt pulley to run the block machine for me. But other than that, there's no real need to torque them that high. So we're going to put them to 125 now in a cross pattern. Got to be a little creative in the tightening process by holding the block so that it doesn't move on me, like that. So we'll do this, give it a click, do these four, like that. And I'll continue the process with the other two mains, and then next week hopefully I'll be able to show you how to wire lock these things before I put the pistons in. Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have the Harley Electra Glide much closer to completion. We'll have that foam all carburetor back together, and we'll get the main cap bolts safety wired on that old Fordson tractor. See you next week.